I'm recording the show on Thanksgiving. I'm not big on holidays, but I'm big on volcanoes. And I hoped that if I waited, we'd have an awesome new eruption to report, which we don't. So this intro is less interesting than I'd hoped for. We're watching to see if a new intrusion of magma in Iceland formed a new volcano. I also dealt with about 30 bazillion Black Friday emails. In these buy a new Kindle and get upgraded green screens computer-generated ads, I realized the algorithm doesn't really know me as a person. Sure, I use every possible digital tool for work, but outside of work, I'm much more of a books, games, and art kind of person. I'm okay that the algorithm doesn't really get me. If you are also having but where is the good stuff emptiness in your inbox, I'd like to let you know that the CosmoQuest team gathered up our favorite stuff in a list on the CosmoQuest website, cosmoquest.org. Click on over and see what we love and maybe find something you'll love. Anyway, there is a lot of news this week that doesn't include an Iceland eruption, but does include new images from a new spacecraft, updates on Lucy's discovery of a contact binary, and more on the OSIRIS-REx sample return. All this and more is coming to you right here on Escape Velocity Space News. I am your host, Dr. Pamela Gay, and I am here to put science in your brain. Just when we thought nothing could be more stunning than the images being released almost weekly by JWST, along comes the newest space telescope on the block, the European Space Agency's Euclid. The mission launched in July of this year, and as with JWST, has released 5 images in a preview of what we can expect going forward. Keep in mind that these are early images. The telescope won't begin routine science observations until the beginning of 2024. Still, these pictures are, in a word, amazing. First, there is the Perseus galaxy cluster, which comprises over 1,000 galaxies. Euclid has managed to see those galaxies, plus about 10,000 more in the background. Some of that light has taken 10 billion years or more to reach us. The fantastic detail in this image and future ones will allow researchers to map out the dark matter and hopefully help us understand the role of dark matter in forming and shaping these clusters. Next, the Euclid team captured 2 galaxies in separate images, spiral galaxy IC342 and irregular galaxy NGC 3822. IC342 is a spiral just like our own Milky Way and is also known as the hidden galaxy because it lies behind the disk of gas and dust in our galaxy. NGC 6822, on the other end of the galaxy scale, is a dense sphere of stars with no spiral arms. These irregular galaxies are considered the building blocks of larger galaxies. Understanding them in detail will help us understand how galaxies evolve. Adding to the data set for dark matter are globular clusters, and Euclid delivered with an image of NGC 6397. Per the European Space Agency's press release, quote, "Currently, no other telescope than Euclid can observe an entire globular cluster in one single observation, and at the same time distinguish so many stars in the cluster." End quote. Finally, we have Euclid's image of the Horsehead Nebula, a place full of forming stars and planets, including some rogue planets. And the European Space Agency team has made these images zoomable, So you can see one such rogue planet if you scroll into the picture. We recommend following the link in our show notes and embiggening these 5 pictures yourself so that you can appreciate all of the details. The goal of the Euclid mission is to provide a gigantic catalog of 1.5 billion galaxies by imaging and comparing the brightness of these galaxies at different wavelengths of visible and near-infrared light. The Euclid Consortium expects to release scientific papers on each of these 5 early images in the coming months in the journal Astronomy and Astrophysics. And we will bring you coverage of those papers and the results when that happens. Last episode, we brought you some early science results from the Lucy mission, which is out exploring asteroids in the main belt on the way to hanging out amongst Jupiter's Trojan asteroids. The biggest piece of news was the discovery that Lucy's first target, a smallish asteroid called Dinkinesh, had a moon. Well, hold on to your hats. That's not the only wild thing about this encounter. It turns out that Dinky's moon, lovingly referred to as Dinky Moon, is actually a contact binary, or as many astronomers are calling it on social media, a moon. The other half of that contact binary was hidden due to the angle at which Lucy imaged the pair. Once the spacecraft and the asteroids themselves moved a bit, the other lobe of the moon came into view. Scientists who have been studying Dinkinesh are excited by this discovery for several reasons. One, contact binaries may be common, but we haven't managed to see many of them up close. Two, we've never seen a contact binary orbiting an asteroid. And three, the orbiting moon explains why researchers have been puzzled by the odd variations in brightness of Dinkinesh. Lucy's principal investigator, Hal Levinson, notes, quote, "I would have never expected a system that looks like this. In particular, I don't understand why the 2 components of the satellite have similar sizes. This is going to be fun for the scientific community to figure out." End quote. Right there with you, Hal. We're definitely looking forward to the answers on this tiny system. For now, Lucy will continue its journey to Jupiter's Trojans by making another pass at Earth for a gravity assist in December, and then a look at another main belt asteroid, Donald Johnson, in 2025. We would be remiss if we didn't update you on another mission, OSIRIS-REx, and on the Bennu sample return. As of writing, no word has been released on if the science team has managed to get the taxum capsule open yet. Remember how that boop became a shove and the capsule had trouble closing on all the sample contained within? Well, that is still a problem. They haven't been able to open the capsule because it is so stuffed with material. And 2 of the 35 fasteners cannot be opened using the tools in the mission's containment unit or glove box. However, the target's goal of the sample return mission was 60 grams of Bennu rock. And just from what has been collected from the outside of the container on the sample head and under the mylar flap covering the sample head, the team has recovered over 70 grams worth of material they didn't try to acquire. Analysis of that material is already underway, and some has already been distributed to various agencies. Meanwhile, the sample container is being kept in a sealed bag full of nitrogen-rich air to keep the sample inside stable and free from earthly contamination. Plus, if you happen to be in Washington, D.C., you can visit a small piece of Bennu, which is now on display in the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. I personally have plans to go. All right, up next, we bring you volcanoes that refuse to erupt. Yeah, that's a thing. Stay tuned. One of the daily activities that is helping me stay sane is volcano watching. I love volcanoes. I especially enjoy when they erupt in places that have webcams but don't affect the people living there. Unfortunately, those are both rare, unless it seems you are in Iceland. Over the past decade, Iceland has given us hours of entertainment, watching lava flow out from rifts and cones. People gather nearby to watch, set up webcams and picnics for science, and even fly drones to catch amazing imagery that they then share with the world at large. And as long as no one gets hurt, that's fine. But volcanoes aren't always polite. In fact, they usually are not polite. They erupt where people live, partially because we keep building near volcanoes for the rich soil. They erupt in backyards, they destroy towns, and when your home is on a volcanic island created by both a hotspot and the mid-Atlantic ridge, there's always a risk that magma will find its way up through the rocks underneath you. Yeah, that's a thing. Look at the videos on, we'll link to them. Anyways, such seems to be the case with the town of Grindavik in the southwest of the island. For weeks now, scientists have been collecting data on earthquake swarms and ground deformation around and under and within the town of Grindavik. Thousands of earthquakes have shaken the region since October 25, marking a magmatic intrusion about 3 to 3.5 kilometers below the surface. Measured subsidence on the west side of Grindavik has been on the order of 1.5 meters, while the uplift caused by the dike's emplacement to the northeast of the town has continued at a steady pace, raising the ground. Additionally, instruments in the area are measuring elevated areas of sulfur dioxide, a potential sign of magma getting ready to breach the surface, but it keeps not doing that. Anyways, on November 10th, the entire town was evacuated, displacing nearly 4,000 people and their animals, including pets and livestock. Drone footage has shown a large crack forming in the city, and steam from the broken water pipes below ground has been escaping. From our own analysis of the footage, we have determined that the local sports complex, several houses, a church, and a Norse shrine or Viking temple has sustained visible damage along the rift. How cool would it be for a volcano, if it's going to destroy things, to start in an ancient Viking temple? Just pointing that out. And yet, as of recording, no magma has breached the surface anywhere near the town. Of course, now weather conditions are impacting everyone's ability to monitor the situation, with wind, fog, and even snow wreaking havoc on the webcams and instruments. Officials continue to state that, quote, an eruption can happen at any time, end quote. And residents are still trying to claim personal items from their homes as the evacuation appears to have no end in sight. The Blue Lagoon, a massive hot springs tourist attraction, has been closed until at least the end of November. The nearby geothermal plant has sustained damage in the quakes, and they're actually building a berm around it to try and move lava should it head that way. Which it doesn't. It doesn't. So we wait. So how did this happen? Was Grindavik built knowingly over a volcano? Are we heading for a Tommy Lee Jones and Hesh situation? And did anyone have Volcano the movie in real life on their 2023 bingo card? Anyways, again, Iceland is a volcanic island. There are 32 known active volcanoes in the tiny country. Beneath the island is a mantle plume or hotspot that is welling up molten rock that feeds the volcanoes. The island also rests atop the mid-Atlantic ridge, where the North American plate and the Eurasian plate are moving away from each other. This movement causes the crust along the ridge to thin. allowing more molten rock to rise up through the crust, making new crust, creating new land as that lava cools underwater. That means that the entire island has potential volcanic hazards pretty much everywhere. But that doesn't mean every place is as likely to erupt as every other place. Grindavik was built on lava flows that are almost 2,500 years old. When Viking settlers founded the town in 934, that lava flow was old, stable, and weathered. There was no reason to believe that a volcanic eruption was anywhere in the near future. Or distant future? I'm not sure what to say. It was 934, but geological time is a thing. Anyways. And so, a tiny fishing community was founded, and in the 20th century grew to be the small coastal town of Grindavik. Tourists come to the Blue Lagoon all year. There's even a bridge crossing a rift valley connecting the two tectonic plates. Now here we are, more than a millennia since the town was founded, faced with the potential destruction of the entire town. Sure, rifts have happened before, and the town simply paved them over. With this new activity, the rift in town may become the rift where the magma breaks through. And similar to another eruption elsewhere in Iceland in the 1970s, Grindavik will end up covered in lava and ash. Or the eruption happens to the north and the lava flow makes its way downhill to the town anyway. Which honestly, either of those means we do need Tommy Lee Jones to come to the rescue. What even is this decade? On the other hand, the magma could manage to not break the surface at all. That could be a thing. I'm still rooting for the volcano, but without any loss of life, please, and let them have time to build the dikes to protect things. Anyways, Iceland isn't the only place with active volcanoes. It's not even the only place with active volcanoes right now. In the last few weeks, the news has also covered eruptions at Mount Etna in Italy, Mayon in the Philippines, the giant volcano I can't pronounce outside of Mexico City, and the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia is also erupting. You are probably not alone if you are feeling like there has been an uptick in volcanic activity around the world. However, it's an illusion. According to the U.S. Geological Service, there are, quote, on average between 50 and 60 volcanoes that erupt each year somewhere on Earth, about one every week, end quote. And while some of these eruptions may coincidentally occur within hours of each other, there is no relationship between them. The Earth is too vast for an eruption in Russia to trigger an eruption in South America, and particularly around the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean. Volcanoes just erupt all the time. The plates, they are a-movin'. And on top of all that, chemical analysis of lava flows from different volcanoes show different compositions. For example, two currently active Hawaiian volcanoes, Mauna Loa and Kilauea, are only 33 kilometers apart from one another, but originate from completely separate magma reserves with different chemistry. That's not to say that volcanoes in a small area cannot be related. The volcanoes of an island arc are all basically from the same magma source. The subduction of a downward moving plate causes rocks to melt at lower temperatures thanks to the influx of water. If a magma source spreads out due to the type of rock near the surface being easier to melt or just being a very large emplacement, lava may erupt from multiple places in a volcanic field. We've seen that in Hawaii. So just because it seems like Mother Earth is angry at us and causing volcanoes to go off at a higher than normal rate, it's not true. Friendly the reminder that correlation is not causation. Up next, we look at what's taking off. Stay tuned. Next up, I'm pleased to welcome on aerospace correspondent Eric Battis for this week's Tales from the Launchpad. Hey Eric, you had a week.
Hi, Pamela. There was another human spaceflight since our last show, and SpaceX launched some things that weren't Starlink satellites for a change. On November 2nd, Virgin Galactic launched their fifth suborbital flight with commercial passengers, Galactic 5. On board were two scientists, the Southwest Research Institute's Alan Stern, principal investigator of New Horizons, and Kelly Girardi, a microgravity researcher with the International Institute of Astronautical Sciences. Dr. Stern managed two experiments for SWRI, including a new wearable instrument to collect data from the human body during spaceflight, and procedures for a future suborbital flight. Girardi performed 3 experiments relating to healthcare in microgravity conditions. The third paying passenger was a tourist. The crew was rounded out by the 2 pilots and an astronaut instructor. The flight reached an apogee of 87.2 kilometers above the U.S. Air Force definition of space during a spaceflight time of about 50 minutes before landing. The landing was successful. Next up is SpaceX's latest uncrewed resupply mission to the ISS, CRS-29, on November 10th, from Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This mission was delayed several times due to problems with leaks in the Dragon's propulsion system, which ultimately required the replacement of a thruster. Let's watch the launch.
T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, liftoff. Vehicle pitching downrange. Engine chamber pressure is nominal. Nominal power and telemetry.
The booster returned to the launch site after separating instead of the more common drone ship landing, a relatively new practice for CRS missions. The Dragon separated during the Falcon 9's upper stage at about 15 minutes after launch. It docked to the ISS the next morning. It will be filled with damaged equipment and research samples and returned to Earth in about a month. The next day, on the opposite coast, SpaceX launched Transporter 9, their latest in a series of low-cost, regular, small, and CubeSat aggregation missions. The launch took place at Space Launch Complex 4E at Vandenberg Space Force Base. Let's watch the launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition, and liftoff of SpaceX Transporter 9. Go Transporter, go SpaceX.
Vehicle pitching downrange. Nominal chamber pressure.
This mission carried 113 spacecraft, with 90 of those separating directly from the rocket, and the remaining 23 on various orbital tugs to be released in different orbits. The 113 spacecraft included the usual mix of commercial, government, and university small and CubeSats. One satellite that caught my eye was Veronica, an amateur radio CubeSat from Slovakia. Students from various high schools in Slovakia will be able to transmit and receive audio and receive slow-scan digital video from the spacecraft, in addition to the Prague Observatory and Planetarium. On November 12th, SpaceX launched the 5th and 6th O3b mPOWER satellites into orbit from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, marking their 4th launch in 5 days. Let's watch the launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, liftoff.
Nominal chamber pressure. Vehicle is pitching downrange. Max Q.
O3b mPOWER is a medium Earth orbit communication satellite operated by SES, one of the larger satellite communications companies. mPOWER is a second-generation constellation and will provide full global coverage and a significant increase in capacity compared to the first 20 satellites. The Falcon 9's first stage landed on the drone ship a short fall of gravitas about 10 minutes after launch. After 3 upper stage burns over the next 2 hours, the 2 satellites were deployed. On November 18th, SpaceX launched their second integrated test flight of the Starship rocket from Boca Chica, Texas. In the 6 months since the first mission, SpaceX made numerous improvements to the rocket and ground systems. The most visible of these was the installation of a water deluge system under the launch pad to prevent the concrete tornado from the last one. In typical SpaceX fashion, this wasn't a typical flame trench, instead consisting of essentially a gigantic metal showerhead powered by high-pressure gas pointed up at the rocket engines to dampen their sound. It's not exactly clear they could have installed a traditional flame trench at the site anyway, as the water table is very high and they lack the necessary permission to expand the launch site further south into the piping plover salt marsh habitat to build the structure. On the vehicle itself, the biggest improvement was the change to how the stages separate. Instead of doing a backflip and roll like they attempted the first launch, SpaceX added a vented interstage on top of Booster 9 to allow the Starship to ignite its engines before separating from Super Heavy. This is called hot staging, and as a practice goes back to the beginning of the space age, but hasn't been attempted at this scale yet. Other improvements focused on Super Heavy, replacing its hydraulic thrust actuators with an electrical actuator system and redesigning the engine bay to reduce fires. Finally, they upgraded the FGS system on both stages since it kinda didn't, terminate the flight adequately the first time it was used. The launch countdown was very smooth, with the only delay coming from a wavered boat in the range in the last minutes of the countdown. The rocket lifted off the pad with a lean, probably intentional this time. All 33 engines were operational throughout the entire first stage burn. The vehicle made it through hot staging. The first stage exploded shortly after initiating its boostback burn to land in the Gulf of Mexico. During the burn, several engines failed to either restart or were firing and shut down. SpaceX has not stated the reason for this yet. The second stage kept going, firing at 6 engines for several minutes until exploding just short of the planned shutdown time, following some noticeable venting. SpaceX stated the automatic FDS had activated itself. NOAA weather radar tracked 2 large debris clouds, one from the booster in the Gulf of Mexico and the other from the second stage just southeast of Puerto Rico. Observers on the ground posted video taken from the island of debris re-entering. There have been no reports of injuries or property damage from any falling debris. In spite of all of these issues, SpaceX described the flight as successful. They also called the first flight successful, so the words are interesting. The Associate Administrator for the Exploration Systems Development Mission Director at NASA, Jim Free, stated he is, quote, looking forward to see what can be learned from this test that moves us closer to the next milestone. SpaceX has a lot of work to do to determine why the stages destroyed themselves after functioning much better than before, but overall, this was way more successful than the first Starship launch. The pad will likely only require minor refurbishment, and unless the first stage plumbing requires a major redesign to fix issues with the engines during the boostback, SpaceX has several completed vehicle sets that could fly in a short period of time. Also since our last show were 4 Starlink launches, 2 classified Chinese launches, and a Chinese communication satellite launch. We keep track of orbital launches by launch site, also called spaceport. According to Rocket Launch Live, so far this year, USA has had 95 launches, including Starship Flight 2, China 53, India 8, Kazakhstan and Russia each have had 7, New Zealand 6, French Guiana and Japan each have had 3, North Korea 2, and Iran, Israel, South Korea, and the United Kingdom each have had 1. Of these 188 launches, there have been 8 failures, reminding us that space is hard.
Thanks, Eric. That was a lot. I'd like to add one final thing about Grindavik before we go. When the town was first evacuated, not everyone had the means to take their pets, and some domestic animals like sheep and horses also had to be left behind. In the weeks since, teams of rescuers have gone back every chance they could and safely brought back everything from aquariums of fish to trailers of livestock. Last report, all critters had been saved that could be found, and only 3 cats had managed to escape rescue attempts. Of the 300 pets left behind, those 3 cats are the only ones not rescued. With reports that town folks may be allowed home, It is our hope those cats will return home as cats so often do. This is your reminder. Everyone needs an emergency plan in case of disaster. Set up your to-go bag and make sure it has a leash carrier or whatever is needed to keep your furry, scaly, or other non-human household members safe and at your side. And that's it for now. Good night, everyone. And remember, go out and look up.